an evening of metaphysical speculation with me, Dennis, and Dr. Lenny Thyme. We'll be here for about an hour, and let's just start with how you doing, Lenny. You okay?
I'm okay. This is our fourth in a series. So we've actually been talking now for almost a month on metaphysical speculations and other things going on in the world. So I'm good to go.
Awesome, awesome. Well, the theme this week for me has been I've been trying to get a conversation going about eugenics in the philosophy group that I'm part of, which partly worked on Monday. The only group that I can stay in for any length of time is the Monday morning group. So, but I was just hurling out stuff into the. We've got a WhatsApp chat room, so I was hurling out stuff there, and it turned into the conversation in the Monday group. So it's been partially successful, I think. People are engaging with me, sometimes incoherently, but they are engaging with me. So that's a start.
Do your buddies at the philosophy group uh, are they in favor or against?
I think generally speaking, they're against. I haven't found anyone who's arguing. Most people are just arguing against even talking about the topic.
Oh, I'm in favor of eugenics. I think all rich people should be euthanized, and that way everybody would have lots of money because it wouldn't be hoarded by just a few people.
Yeah, there might be an argument for having a bit of a reset every 20 years. I came up with an argument for that, but the argument I was using was economic. It wasn't really a like a social argument. It was more of an economic argument.
I'd like to see a system that was not based on economics, where our governance was not based on geography, and let's get the basis of society on things that we can discuss, and let's fix the problems rather than chase the wealth.
Yeah, I think problem solving is a key part of it. If you're going for money, you just fix the low hanging fruits, the fruit with the money available, and you never actually get to the real underlying problems.
Well, there's really no fix for the system as it is, but it's important that we look at other systems and other ways of doing things. I'm a chemist, and I think we could base a system on balance where the equations were balanced and input in and export out were roughly equivalent. And then a role of the government might be to balance those exchanges. But the government does not belong in business at all. And the business does not belong in government. And what we have now is just world fascism.
Yeah, it's they used to call it the third way when I used to work at the London School of Economics for a while on the switchboard there, and they had the guy who was in charge there was a guy called Anthony Giddens, who wrote a book called The Third Way, which was the combination of private business and government in joint ventures, which is
I'm
what Tony
familiar
Blair
with the
did.
fourth way, Ouspensky's book from his learnings with Gurdjieff.
Right, I've not read that one.
They had a totally different idea of social structure, but Gurdjieff was popular for a while, and he was another one of those great thinkers of the 1920s and 30s who got totally rolled over and disappeared when they upgraded the system sometime around World War II. And they
Right.
basically rewrote history so that coming out of the war, we had a whole different world than going in, but people were excited because it was it sounded cool. But it really, at that fourth turning, what happened was we introduced realistic fiction into the lives of everybody using screens. the movie industry came of age, television began and replaced radio. And so everybody got to have a common knowledge based on what they were taught in the schools and what they observed on the screens. But somehow the screens managed to take over. And at this point, the question is how much control we want to give to our screens. Do we want
Yeah,
to make full use of AI and give it all over to the screen and not have any humanity in it? But I don't know. Here in the US, it's a regulatory state, and there's more laws that nobody knows about until they enforce them. A lot of them are administrative laws, and it's like rule of law is gone because the laws have been created to benefit the wealthy class of people and the corporations. And so Citizens United in the United States just made a mockery of being human because with corporations that have no human responsibility but can outlive any human, boy, that's a combination that we just have to junk rule of law as opposed to fixing it because I don't think there's a fix. What can you do? Have Congress just spend a session repealing laws? But they're the only ones who should make law, and all this administrative law should be tossed because it hasn't been set through Congress. But Congress, pro is the opposite of con, so progress is the opposite of Congress.
right. That kind of makes sense. Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether there's a fix for everything in society, but we might be able to fix one or two things.
Open speech would be a nice thing, and we are doing that. We here are talking, and people who are listening should not take me seriously, but with a grain of salt. And if I say something that raises your hackles, do not believe that it's necessarily true. It's just something that I've thought about and think that a contrary point of view is pretty much okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. There are some occasions where I'm quite happy to take on the role of the enemy, just because somebody has to have that role.
Yeah,
Or
I don't mind stepping into the fire on the wrong side of an argument. But remember when we learned debate 40, 50 years ago? It was civil and there were two sides to a story, and you didn't even know which side of the story you were on until you showed up at the debate. And so you had to know both arguments forwards and backwards, and it became a learning experience. People treated each other civilly, whereas now you give an unpopular opinion and they just shout you down.
yeah, being cancelled is not exactly the same as losing a debate, is it? That's more like winning a debate.
Yeah, basically that's what they do. They cancel you as soon as you show any sign that you have intelligence and that you might confer it upon the masses.
Yeah, it's a bit of an issue that it's starting to go away a little bit, but it's not completely gone by any means. There's still a lot of cancel culture around.
Okay, so frame our issue that we're going to be talking about. What is it? I can't even remember the topic. Ah,
Uh, Eugenics was the original
eugenics.
topic.
Explain eugenics so that the speakers, the people watching, have an idea of what we're actually talking about.
Right, eugenics is a kind of an old Victorian idea where they were taking the principles of horse breeding and animal breeding and applying them to people. So if you breed in characteristics in a horse, it means you can breed in characteristics in people. So it was a combination of Charles Darwin's origin of species ideas, plus some of the social kind of structures that were going on at the time. So it was a way of getting rid of poor people and people who were sick. Basically, it's one of the ways of doing that the Victorians
So
thought about.
essentially, they breed the population to cause autism, and then they say that autism is a bad disease, and they go about and kill all the autistics.
Ooh, that's one way of looking at it. If you're breeding the disease in first and then finding a way to cull people, then that's a particularly nefarious way of doing it. I think they were more just planning to raise the level of uh, stuff that was going on within particular families. So, like I was looking at the Daltons, the Wedgworths, and the Darwins, the Wedgworths, and the Galtons. Galton, yeah, I think it was Galtons, and they all intermarried in 2 or 3 generations. They married the first and second cousins, basically, and it was an arrangement to keep the families wealthy and to keep the families intellectual.
And
So you're
to
not
keep
letting
the
any kind of
families inbred so they couldn't be intellectual down the road.
yeah. There's an element of that as well. I don't think they realised what they were doing with that.
It gets me back to the genetics, and we think we've solved genetic structure, but there's multiple layers of form in genetics, and I don't think we're there at all. I think that genes, which are fragments of DNA, have different ways of expressing themselves into form: proteins, enzymes, lipids, fats. And a lot of what happens is that certain pathways of mechanism get hijacked for an alternative purpose when certain genes turn on or off. And so you've only got so much system in your body, and it's all set up to take in food and air and water and put out a whole lot of shit and piss. But that's what humans are. We're just take in the food, put out the waste, reuse the waste to make more food, which would make lots of
Yeah,
sense if we actually did it that way. But closing the loop on certain systems is not going to be easy. And at this point, we're going to probably post this to YouTube, so I won't go down that road. But there's a lot of things I could say are part of the eugenics of the moment that are happening in such a way that it definitely deserves to be discussed as a topic.
yeah. Well, that's what I thought. I thought if what I'm seeing in various places that all combines to suggest that there's some kind of eugenics plot going on, then
Who's making that
ignoring
call?
that. Sorry.
Who's making the call? Who's running this eugenics plot?
Well, that's a question. That's a good question. There used to be the eugenics societies, isn't it? That are now at the Wellcome Trust. Coincidentally, the archive for the British Eugenics Society is at the Wellcome Trust on Euston Road in the basement. I think you've got to be an academic to get in there, but I did look it up at one point because I did a radio show about eugenics about 4 years ago.
I wonder if the Lucas Trust has anything to do with that also.
Lucis Trust was more. It's more about will, and it's will. Was it will, love, and intelligence? Was their main things, the seven rays and that sort of stuff. I didn't notice. I've read most of the Lucas Trust books, and I've never noticed anything about eugenics in there.
I don't know. When did they change it to the Lucas Trust from the Lucifer Trust?
I would imagine sometime in the early 1920s. yeah, I think the books were all published in the 1920s, 1921, 22, 23 kind of time.
So, who were the main players involved in that scheme back then?
That was Alice Bailey, and she was married to a guy who was a 33rd degree Freemason, I think, if I remember rightly, Foster Bailey,
Were
who also wrote.
Blavatsky and Steiner involved?
Blavatsky was earlier. Blavatsky was about 25 or 30 years earlier. Steiner was in the middle, so Steiner was the early part of the 20th century. So it was all kind of it's all response to somebody else's writing, isn't it? So the way philosophy works is the same way theosophy works. It's like somebody writes something, and then somebody responds to it and critiques it and gives their own opinion about it, and then somebody else writes about that and combines the two together and comes up with a third theory or a fourth theory or whatever it is, and it moves forward like that. And Alice Bailey was a response to Blavatsky, I think.
I wonder how many people these days still write. A lot of them just make videos and talk and then have it transcripted. And that's not
Yeah,
really writing, although it's an interesting way of publishing books to give talks, have it transcripted, and then publish the transcripts.
yeah. I mean, at some point I might do that with what we're doing because I've got access to Otter AI, which will do that. I haven't done it yet because I haven't had the time or the inclination, but it's on my list of things that I might do.
Well, if you're going to use AI, definitely take the time to train it properly because there's several people I know using AI who have their AI trained in their system so that they can have a reasonable discussion with the AI. But AI is pre programmed to have a certain disposition towards the world. And if you don't watch it, they're going to insert facts into your transcripts that aren't really facts, but are moralisms programmed into the AI. And
Yeah,
so trust of the AI is, well, I'm not sure that it is even cognitive. I think that the programming is important, but I think the programming is done at a level below individuals programming before it's released. And so I use AI for certain things. I try not to let it do my thinking. And if I'm in a video conversation with a number of other people, I take my own notes and I read my notes, compare them to the AI notes. And that's how I tell whether the AI is on topic or not. And a good AI can be on topic 80 to 90% of the time, but it's that 10% of the time when they're not on topic that you got to catch them and make sure they are corrected because they're going to spew forth the worldview of the programmers, not really the programmers, but the corporations that own the programmers. And
yeah,
there's a lot of there's a lot of reticence to create something new because they're building on this is the system we're building. And I don't agree with technocracy. And I do not think we should be in a technocratic world unless we are cognitively aware that it is so. The world can be anything we want it to be. And so I think that we as individuals doing what we do affect the world more than we think we do, but there's multiple timelines of effectiveness, and the ontology of nature requires initiative and it wants novelty. And so if you're creating something new and it's different. The ontology favors you as an individual over those people who are just in the paradigm being what they are. And
Yeah,
I think it's come to the point where we have a lot of NPCs, non player characters, who are here for the narrative, but not necessarily here in cognitive thought. And that a lot of these people were cognitive thinkers in the reality, but their physical being took a different timeline, but they're important to the narrative so that the paradigm that is displayed by the narrative makes congruent sense. But there might be 5, 8, 13 different narratives that are feasible through the paradigm, and mixed and matched, there's something sorting them out so that whatever we do that is novel and different is going to be favored because universe hasn't necessarily seen it before. But universe is old enough that it has seen everything multiple times. And so we come back in the same scenario with a new spin, and maybe we get a different result so that those timelines are favored in a way that people who are cognitive on that timeline can actually create changes that would otherwise be impossible if they just became one of the sheeple, one of the NPCs.
yeah. I think the universe does favour novelty. I can see how that would work. And it's combinations of things that already exist most of the time, but it's just unusual combinations. You look at the way people remake old pop songs as heavy metal records, or old heavy metal records as pop songs, and it's those are the things that get my attention because they're familiar but with a new twist to them.
Or how the movies are now on the third rendition of a story where each story has similar but not quite the same scripts. And
Yeah,
so soon they'll be putting out new Harry Potter series or a new Star Wars series just because the old one has become dated and the vehicle is entertaining enough that they know they'll get the eyeballs on the screen.
yeah. Same thing with Doctor Who. It reinvents itself every 3, 4, 5 years by changing the lead actor.
Did they finish with the Lady Doctor Who?
Yeah, yeah. So that guy now, Shooty Gatwa, he's on his. I think he's on his final series, or he's contracted for one more, but he's gone off to do theatre. So I don't know whether he's actually doing one more series or not. They're not very good, but they've got a different style to them. And
I watched a lot of Doctor Who when I was watching television. And when I picked up in 2017, after having spent about 15, 20 years totally offline, one of the first things I did was I caught up on the Doctor Who's.
yeah, I mean, I'm going backwards to John Pertwee and Tom Baker again now.
Oh, those were
Slowly but
fun.
surely working my way through those from the 70s because that's what I grew up with. I was 5 years old when John Pertwee took over, but I vaguely remember it. It's like one of my first memories.
Who is the
So,
Doctor Who during the Bad Wolf?
oh, that was Christopher Eccleston.
Yeah, that I really liked the Bad Wolf series. I didn't see it coming the way it came, but I remember Billy Piper as uh, his sidekick female traveler,
Yeah,
and I really enjoyed those couple years of the series. Wasn't necessarily fond of the way they ended it, but they sort of painted themselves into a corner.
they had no choice because he decided he was going to leave. So he had a big row with the producers, and just he was going to leave, so they had to write him out. And then he moved to New. He got blacklisted by the BBC after that. Nobody would touch him. So he moved to New York.
Okay, Broadway.
I think was doing Broadway, trying to get into movies or whatever. But
Yeah, Broadway is a whole different scenario for artists and actors than anywhere else in the world. And once they get onto Broadway, they tend to get sucked in. But the star appeal of having somebody whose name is known on Broadway sells tickets. And
yeah,
that's really what it's about.
yeah, it's all just name recognition, isn't it? So there's a
And they
lot of
bring back the same shows time after time because they know that those shows are familiar to the fans.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, Doctor Who's repeating stories they've used like 15, 20 years ago. They're repeating them with slight variations.
So these aliens that are supposed to come from space and invade Earth, are they Daleks?
The Daleks haven't been in there for a while, but the Daleks are licensed from Terry Nation's estate, and they don't give them permission to use the Daleks all that often these days because they overuse them.
Well, they sure did. They had seasons based on the Dalek Wars.
Yeah, yeah. It was a bit over the top. They all turned into Daleks and Cybermen in every episode, which was a bit too much.
Do you recall which season it was when the Doctor and his sidekick got brought into the room of history where they had like the stretched out oldest person in the universe and a whole bunch of different things?
No, I don't remember that specifically. It was the
Oh
face of
well.
Bo. Do you remember the face of Bo?
Oh yeah, I do. That
That
was
was a
an
great.
interesting series. Yeah. It's hard to recollect all the different seasons of Doctor Who when I never watched them in the sequence that they were produced. I could watch a season in sequence, but somehow I never got all the doctors in the right row. But wouldn't that be something to have a series where we went through each doctor and showed an episode and talked about storylines and that? Nah,
Yeah, I mean,
too many other things to do. But it would be good.
it'd be interesting to dissect it a little bit. And it's a way of talking about metaphysics that brings people in.
Well, there is a phone booth in town here that reminds me of the TARDIS. It's a phone booth, not a police booth. So it reminds me even more of the opening to Get Smart when Maxwell gets in after walking through all the open doors, he picks up the phone and the floor drops out.
Right, yeah.
That's what I think this phone booth should do. But it's very, very rare to have coin fed phone booths in the United States anymore. A lot of
Yeah,
them A lot of them in cities were just destroyed because people wanted the metal from the phone booth. Uh, Value. You can't leave value out anymore in a city, it'll just get usurped.
yeah. I mean, they use the phone boxes at the moment for Wi-Fi coverage where I am. So the Wi-Fi that I use when I'm using it, I'm on the phone at the moment. But there's a phone box opposite me on the other side of the road, and I can just about get the Wi-Fi signal from there. It's a BT signal, and my stepdad's on BT broadband, so he's got a password for it. So I borrowed his password for like the last 10 years or more, where I can get access to Wi-Fi. It's always useful to have. But that's it is still a phone box, but it's got the Wi-Fi coming out of it as well.
I don't use my Wi Fi very often. Instead, I use a mobile signal from my phone. So right now, my internet access is through my phone,
Yeah,
and I pay an extra $20 a month or so. But I got enough so that I don't run out of resource before the end of the month. Had to
yeah,
buy extra because it was frustrating. I could go about 28 days of a 30-day month, and then I'd have to take 2 days off because I didn't have signal, or I could
yeah,
go to a coffee shop and do the Wi Fi there. But I think part of the hardness of my computers, I overuse computers and they break on me. And part of it is because I carry them around and take them places. Whereas if it just sat on the desk, it would work fine forever. What I tend to do is break the connections where the plugins are. I'm
yeah,
at the point where I will be getting a new computer within the next couple weeks anyway, because Windows is going to stop supporting Windows 10. And my computer is 2.5 years old. To upgrade it from Windows 10 to Windows 11 would seriously push the capacity of the memory, whereas
yeah,
memory is so cheap now that the new computer that I'll buy will have about 20 times the memory of the current computer I'm on, plus a much faster operating system. So I figure I'm better off getting the Windows 11 on a new computer than trying to upgrade the old one. Not to mention that I do have plug-in problems and other different minor technical issues that give me irritation.
yeah. I tend to buy a new laptop every 2 or 3 years, and that seems to work for me. But partly because they they either break or I try to do too many things at once, and I run out of capacity on everything. So yeah, the previous one I couldn't do any kind of video processing on. This one I can do a little bit of video processing on, but it's not enough to actually process a big video. I can do like a 5 minute video. I couldn't do a 50-minute video on this one. But I'm going to need to upgrade to something where I can do that at some point. So
Well, here in the States, another reason to upgrade is because all the electronics are imported, and we have decided to put tariffs on the rest of the world. And so, how those tariffs work seem to change from week to week. But when there was going to be a 70% tariff on goods from China, and all the chips in the computer come from China, then we have better get your upgrade now before the tariffs take the price into the stratosphere. But
yeah,
then they announce that no, tariffs aren't going to take effect for another 6 months. Opens your window again. But my window closes when Microsoft stops supporting Windows 10, and that's coming in this calendar year, although I don't know when.
right, yeah, yeah. It's always been a push for technology for upgrades. It's always the way the business models work. And there's some things I like about it, some things I don't like about it. I don't like having to replace me laptop every 3 years, but I do it, and I bite me tongue.
It's a process called churning. They make it so that it won't keep up, so that you're continually replacing things.
Yeah, yeah, which is a shame because back in the day when I was a kid, you used to be able to buy stuff that would last for 10 years.
I remember my first cell phone, you could charge it and it would go for almost 2 weeks. Nowadays, your cell phone pretty much has to sit on the charger because if you use it continually, you only get about 8 hours.
Yeah, you might get a day out of it if you're lucky. It's tricky though, but in theory that's progress. Although it probably isn't progress when you look at it objectively, but they sell it to us as progress.
In philosophy, we would call it the broken window fallacy.
Right.
You can't make money by selling somebody a window that you broke the previous window just in order to make the sale of a new window. There, that's it's hard. I don't know. I think philosophy has gotten too esoteric for a lot of people that they can't hold multiple concepts in their mind at the same time. And decision making really requires multi step evaluation. Getting people now beyond the first step is difficult. The attention span is so low that it's hard to get them off TikToks and YouTube shorts. And so I don't think we're preaching to the crowd. I think we're preaching to a very narrow group of people who are thinking and taking what we say and thinking about it. And hopefully they'll start posting and getting back to us so that we can seriously discuss these ideas.
Yeah, I'm in favour of anything that produces discussion. I tend to be a bit provocative in the philosophy groups, just because it takes a long time to get a conversation going.
Well, you could use eugenics in that sense. Anybody who isn't taking part in the conversation, we can just kill off.
Right. Yeah. That might be a bit drastic, but it's worth considering.
Well, I'm not sure that everybody who is human alive on this earth at this time is actually human alive or on this earth at this time. If there's multiple earths on different scales, each running through the same narrative and the same paradigm, but the narrative is open to change, then tangents can be taken and things that work can be advanced, and you have different trajectories of time. But these trajectories of time are tangent to the main story, and the main story is the one we keep coming back to. Although it seems like every decade the world is getting less real, that the stuff that we know to be true, we have to question because it's no longer true. And I don't know, I see lots of Mandela effects of things that lead me to believe I'm not on the world that I was born on. But maybe I'm doing something novel enough that I'm advancing in sequence that will get to the point where the Earth that we are currently is on a trajectory to become a living Earth. And the planetary ontology works with certain humans to overcome the tradition and history to give some sort of novel approach that's going to work. The idea of the planet being alive is not something new, but it certainly is not a common understanding amongst the population. And certainly the industry for profit industry has taken the earth as a place to harvest raw materials from rather than to develop a means of exchange. Uh, it would be Well, we don't have access to other planets, so it's not an interplanetary exchange, but humans on the surface of the Earth exchanging goods and resources with the Earth and cultivating uh, reasonable treatment would be much better than spraying chemtrails and poisons and starting wars and stuff that we have now.
Yeah, my starting point is the Earth is conscious, very definitely conscious in some form. I don't know exactly what form that is, but you can certainly have a conversation with the Earth and get a response.
Well, I find that I can do things that allow nature to come to me. And so I feel as part of nature, the birds at the bird feeder are always present. The cats are talking to me and I'm talking back to them. The plants, a friend of mine just brought over 9 different plants for me to grow this summer. I now have some basil and some feverfew and a few others, lemon balm. But
Right.
I got to find a place where I can put them in the ground. I'm not sure if I'm going to stay in the place I'm at. Maybe I'm better off keeping them in pots.
Right. Yeah. Well, in any case, it's a relationship with the Earth. It's a nurturing relationship with the Earth, so it's a positive relationship.
It's also a personal relationship. It's not something that I share with other people, although I consider my cats people and maybe even consider the birds people when I'm interacting with them. I talk in the same tone with the same intention because all life is all life. And I tend to think that life is water based rather than carbon based, and that the carbon basis is one of those misleading things that they get to keep us all off form so we can't figure out what's going on. But water carries frequency, and therefore, if you alter the status of your water, you're going to change your vibration.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Yeah,
It's important. Go ahead.
go ahead. No, you
Important
first.
to have clean water.
Yeah, and well, I used to do a thing with my food and my water where I would just add a bit of Reiki to it. It's like it's like asking for a blessing, effectively. That's basically what it is. It's just like, but but I'm the one that's blessing it because I'm representing God at that point. So instead of asking for God to bless my food, I'm blessing my food myself because I want to recognize my role in that formula as well. I think it's important to recognize that.
Structured water is really important also. And because water is a polar charged molecule, it can bind to different things and take different geometric forms. And pure straight water with nothing in it, easy water in Jerry Pollock's terms, is one of those things that acts as an intelligent source. But once you have salts or ions in the water, then that polarizes the water and water takes a different shape and form. There's also a difference between flowing water and structured water. The water in our bodies, a lot of it's in the bloodstream and flowing, but a lot of it is in the proteins and enzymes and the physical build out, almost to the point where, well, we're 70% water. So the 2/3 of your body is water weight, and that water is structurally supporting the proteins and the enzymes and stuff. That was interesting. My computer changed camera on its own.
Right? Yeah. You just flipped into OBS for a second.
I do not understand how interfaces work, but I believe we're at the point where we're continually monitored all the time, and they can change things in an instant and cut off anybody's access. But if they cut off too many people's access, we're all going to go and do something different. And that's what we should do. We should not be spending 8 to 10 hours a day on our computers attaching to the internet world. That's not the word I wanted, but as you grow older, your mind gets more feeble and you forget words. And it's not quite a dementia, but I can't remember names. I can't remember certain words, but then I'll use the word and not have a problem with remembering it the next time. So I just call it old timer's disease.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much what it is. My mother's like that. She's got a tendency to repeat the same story over and over again, and she's forgotten that she's even told me. By the time she's told me the second or third time, it's like, all right, I might have heard this one before.
Well, that's common because a lot of people spend their time telling the same story to a whole bunch of different people. And you get to repeating the story and it refines itself and it turns into new story and the nuance of the story. And
Yeah,
people know what they know, but it's not broad enough to keep the conversation going for a long time. So they slip back into the stories that they know and repeat themselves. It's like if you took all the conversations we've had over the course of years, I'm sure we've had the same conversation 2 or 3 times, but from different perspectives so that the conversation still makes sense.
yeah, it's always from a slightly different angle, isn't it? So you can get to the same topic, but via a different route, if you like.
I don't think we've talked eugenics before.
No, no, I don't think we have. No.
I think that there's room for eugenics, but it would help if the people who were making the call for the eugenics actually were basing it on something that's real. And I I think that genetics is a construct. It works nicely within the grid of 64 that I've been using because there are four different uh, components of DNA and they match in AT and CG so that the C and the G's are balanced, the A's and the T's are balanced, but the ratio of A's and T's and C's and G's and the order are not balanced. But there's 64 possibilities, and supposedly they code for 23 different proteins, but I don't know. I just can't buy the coding aspects to be limited that way. And there's way too much functionality in biological structure to have only 64 primary ways. Primary, everything's not built out of the same 64 things. So, genetics has gone a long way. I think the Human Genome Project really messed people up because it gave us a target and pushed us way ahead of our comprehension. And now we've got a shitload of things that are being dumped on us by big pharma and big medicine that are based on the understanding of genetics that we don't really have.
Yeah, we're 20 years behind because the Human Genome Project was 25 years ago, pretty close to that.
Yeah, but that's only when for the target of having the whole genome. I'm sure that there are many, many different researchers at different universities still working on the genome project. And see, I bred rabbits for years, and using the genetics of rabbits to do things like improve the weight of the fryers or to improve the shoulders of the show animals that we were putting out on the tables. Our rabbits were always weak in the shoulders, so we went and bought a male from somebody who continually won the shows and improved our herd so that by the end of the time I was raising rabbits, we were actually placing in the top three for at the rabbit shows. But I haven't been on the farm since 2006, and our rabbitry pretty much was over by the time I left. So it goes.
Right. Yeah.
So it looks like we're getting close to the end of our hour.
Yeah. It's been quick. Do you want anything you want to conclude with, Lenny?
Philosophy is a good topic, and there's so many different areas of roads to go down, and there's so many considerations that we bring up, and what the audience is hearing is only the surface of how much there is to go into depth. So I could see this conversation taking place over several weeks as we find more examples of what's going on and start talking about both the ethics and the morality of doing eugenics. So, good topic today.
Yeah, I mean, it'll keep us going for a while. If we just come back to it every now and again, it'll keep us going. There's plenty of examples. I came up with half a dozen examples just off the top of my head.
I
So
really think that the class called politicians could be erased conveniently and not be a big loss.
I tend to agree with that. Uh, all right, we'll wrap it up at that point, Lenny. I think we've come to a good conclusion. Uh, yeah, do you want to tell people where to find you online?
I'm the Mad Dr. Thyme on Minds, and that's a good place to find me for this week.
All right, that's fair enough. And if you look for anything that involves the words "free association radio show," you'll find me. That's mostly where I am on Spotify and Google Podcasts if that still exists, and Amazon Podcasts and Amazon Music and all of those places. All right, we'll wrap that up for now. Thanks for coming on, Lenny. It's been fun. I'll
Certainly.
see you next week.
Everyone have a great rest of the week.
All right, I'll see you next week.